Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Epic Photography Podcast. This is episode... what episode number is this, guys?
9.
We're getting that deep into it. And this episode is kind of geared around copyright and legal, boring stuff, and looking after your images and finding your images when they're stolen and how to deal with it. And I say boring legal stuff, but you've got the right people on the team today. So I'm Dave Williams, and joining me are Stephanie Richer. Hi, Stephanie.
Hey.
And we've got Sean Elizabeth.
Hello.
Hey.
And you realize, Dave, I take personal issue to the term boring legal stuff, since I am a licensed attorney.
That is why I was going to start with you. So... the first thing I'm going to say is, for an international audience, the copyright laws and the laws surrounding copyright and image theft and things like that vary from country to country. So our areas of specialist, or our specialist areas, that's probably the best thing to say, are the UK and the USA. And Stephanie, you've got quite a good background for talking about this from a USA perspective. So tell us a little about what copyright really means in the States.
Okay. First of all, can I start with a disclaimer? Any of the dear readers listening to this right now, I am not giving legal advice. We are not establishing an attorney-client relationship, so don't sue me for malpractice. Thank you. I am a licensed attorney in the state of California, and while I did not practice intellectual property law, I do know something about it. And I think one of the biggest problems that people have is that they don't understand that copyright is all about ownership. Everything else, so whether it's a print release or you may have a client that says, "Oh, I want all the pictures with all the rights to my to my pictures." Everything else is really about permission, or as we say in law, license to do something, license to print it, license to make a T-shirt from it, whatever it might be. So copyright is about ownership, and a lot of photographers, I notice, think that they need to do something to get their copyright. The fact remains, as soon as you press the shutter, whoever is the maker of the picture owns the copyright, just by going click on the camera. So when you see a lot, I know that some photographers have said, well, if I put a picture on, say, Facebook, I need to put something like copyright Dave Williams, 2022, all rights reserved. Absolutely not. In fact, I've seen some photographers probably do themselves a disfavor by putting these big copyright notices on their picture, which take away. I mean, why are you using the picture? If you're using it for marketing, you're taking away. Yeah, it looks horrible. I remember.
I saw. Did you see Ramtin Kazemi put something on Facebook recently, saying, "Sorry to say this, photographers, but that watermark." Signature that you're putting on your images is ruining them, and I have to agree. It is that watermark is not going to protect your image, and it is quite easily removed.
Very easy,
he's right.
Especially with all the software now, it's very easy. Yeah.
The only thing I could say about a watermark, since lawyers we always look at both sides. Arguably, it's giving somebody notice that the item is copyrighted. Yeah. But we've got a situation, I don't know about you guys, but I've seen so many times people who are web designers or they work for a company for they do graphic design for a company. Their boss or a client will come to them and say, well, we need some pictures on the website. Well, okay, we need to call a photographer. Oh, no, just Google some images and steal them. And a lot of people don't realize all those Google images, it's copyrighted material for the most part.
Yeah.
Right? Because occasionally there are going to be images that are what's considered public domain. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe the American copyright law is that the copyright exists for 75 years past the death of the maker.
Right.
So, yeah, well...
I think in the UK it's 100.
Yeah, it's something like that. I do know that Disney, I read an article a little while back, Disney is actually lobbying to change the copyright laws, because guess what's coming up to public domain? Mickey Mouse.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What can we do with Mickey Mouse? Anyway, right. So the thing you said there about once you press the shutter, you made the art, you created that thing, you own the copyright. That's exactly what it's like here in the UK. There's something called the Designs, Copyrights and Patents Act. I think it's 1978. I might be mistaken on the year, but it's really boring. And it says, ultimately, that if you create intellectual property, such as a photograph, a painting, whatever, once you've made it, it is your copyright. You don't need to do anything at all to register it, to protect it. It's automatically your copyright. You own it. And in terms of a photo, from the second you press the shutter button. So that's a good thing. And if it's similar in the States, that's also a good thing over there. But there is a method of registering a copyright on photos over there. But that leads us on to something interesting that you guys wanted to talk about, which was a monkey.
Yes. So basically, photographer David Slater went to Sulawesi, Indonesia, and was photographing rare macaques. And basically, he said that he couldn't get close enough to them. He wanted to leave his camera there and, see what happened. Anyway, he left his camera there, and one of the macaques, called Naruto, actually came across and picked up his camera and decided to snap a few selfies. Right. And the big hoo-ha was well, does the copyright land with Naruto, the macaque, or is it with David Slater, whose camera it was? So, Stephanie,
it's a fact of camera ownership because he didn't actually press the shutter. The monkey pressed, or the macaque pressed the shutter.
Well, this is it.
This did go to the courts in the United States. And
it was a 2-year court.
Yeah. And the U.S. Copyright Office determined, no, the copyright still remains with he who pressed the shutter. Furthermore, animals as non-humans do not have rights, and so that picture remains in the public domain. I believe in the UK it's never been put before the court, but I think that the UK Copyright Office did come out after the American Copyright Office gave their decision and basically said, oh yes, animals don't have human rights, so that monkey does not own the picture.
Yeah, I think what they were saying is...
but more importantly, the photographer doesn't own the picture.
Nope, that's right. It's public domain.
Basically, he was told that he would have to give 25% of all monies earned to Naruto and, to help save the macaques in Indonesia. So
to the monkey.
Not specifically to him, obviously, but to help.
I just want you to know I'm the monkey's trustee, right? Actually, Sean, where that came from is that he was sued by PETA.
Yeah, that's
people for the ethical treatment of animals, and the case never went to court. Instead, they settled out of court, and that was part of the settlement that he would give 25% or something for the monkeys or whatever.
But it does definitely lead on to this, though. Who, if someone presses the shutter, is that the person who owns that photograph? Because, so what if you, for instance, I've done it quite a few times where I've set my camera up with all the camera settings and I've had 2 different cameras and everything. So I've said to my friend, right, you take some pictures here, everything is done for you in camera. All you have to do is press the shutter. So actually, by doing that, I've given them copyright then.
Yes, you have. But under U.S. law, yeah.
But I've basically done everything else behind the scenes. So it's kind of can you do a joint copyright, perhaps? I don't know.
Well, actually, yes, you can.
You can.
I mean, you could both agree. A lot of people don't realize that you can contract for pretty much anything. So you and your friend could come to that. Like, for example, I know that with a lot of people like myself who do weddings, we have seconds at weddings. So the question then becomes, the pictures that they're taking for me at the wedding, who owns the copyright to that? And the answer is, if it's a for hire type situation, you could argue in court, I own the copyright since I hired them to take the picture.
Yeah.
You want to get around that easily? Have a contract.
I was going to say a contract is the way around, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And by the way, can I add a little something in about registration? Because besides sex and food, what else do humans run off of? Money. Okay. So registering your picture with the Copyright Office, and I don't know if this is the same in the UK. In the US, it allows you to go after statutory damages if somebody violates your copyright. So, like it or not, lawyers like to make a profit. That's why they're in the business.
Yeah.
If you haven't registered your picture and you go to a lawyer and say, here's a hypothetical. Dave Williams took this fabulous picture of a glacier up in Iceland. And Colgate, Johnson & Johnson, decided to take it off the internet and use it for, let's say, advertising toothpaste. Make your teeth as pearly white as this pristine glacier. Or how do you say it how do you Brits say it? Glacier?
Glacier.
Yeah, glacier. Glacier.
Okay.
Some people say glacier, yeah.
Yeah. It's made with tomato.
If Dave didn't register his picture and he goes to a lawyer's going to look at him and say, "Oh, this is going to be great. Let's sue Johnson & Johnson. Yeah. Did you register it?" No. Lawyer's going to say, "Get out of my office." But if you registered it, now there's a better chance, right? The best Dave could do if he hadn't registered is send Johnson & Johnson a letter and say, "Guys, could you please take it down?" And if they're really being nice, they may say, "Okay, what's your hourly rate to shoot something like this?" "Oh, I'd sell it for, 20 quid. "Oh, okay, we'll give you 20 quid. Versus 150,000 for each violation if it had been registered. So that's one of the
thing.
benefits.
We don't have that because we don't need it. That legislation I mentioned covers it de facto. So there's no need to register anything, and therefore there's no method to register a photo. You can register other artworks, designs. It doesn't. It's more than just photos. This legislation. So if you design a chair, for example, and register that design, then that's something you can do. But there's no method to register photos. There's no need to, because they're automatically your copyright. The only thing you need to do is prove it's yours.
Right. And what's interesting is under the U.S., this is under the Digital Millennial Communications Act. Or, excuse me, Digital Millennial Copyright Act. So it's more than photos. I'm probably going to see NFTs getting into that game as well, since that's part of the landscape now. But Dave, I used you as the hypothetical because I know that both Sean and I, we shoot people for the most part. And nobody's going to try to steal a copy of one of my brides, unlikely, off the internet. Right? It's not something they can really use. But Dave, you shoot a lot of pictures that, and in fact, people have sort of borrowed, haven't they?
Yeah, it's happened. It's happened a lot. So one example I can give is a travel company, like a package holiday company. I can't remember the destination, but they took one of my photos to advertise a particular destination. And I found it on Instagram, and I sent them an email, and they said that they were under the impression that it was out in public domain and therefore they could use it anywhere they wanted. And I replied to them saying, well, no, because you're a company that sells a service, and similarly, I'm a company selling a service. I'm a photographer, and photos are the product. And in order to get by in this world, I need to sell those photos. They're not for free. And therefore, if you're going to use them, firstly, if you just asked beforehand, I probably would have just said yes. But because they didn't, I just quoted them a bill saying, well, this is what happens. This is how it works. This is the effort that went into it. And here's the bill. And I made it something very simple, like £150 or something, quite low, but enough. The going rate really for buying a photo for Instagram. And after my email explaining everything, and then them initially refusing, somebody else got involved from that company when I mentioned the legal issues around it, and suddenly the bill was paid. That was that. It was done. But the thing is, that was because I found that image by chance. And so if you're going to protect your images, you need to know how to find them if they're being misused, if people are stealing them and using them for their own gain. Yeah. And that's the thing there, really. The thing is they're using it for their own gain. If someone, if a non-profit or someone, a company, a reputable company, asks nicely, can I please use this image for this purpose? I will probably say yes. a bill will come if it's for them to gain from it. So to combat this, you need to be able to find your images if they're being used. And the images that you're looking for are any images that you've put on the internet, in any location on the internet. Because once they're out there, they can be stolen, they can be taken, copied, saved, whatever it may be. And so one of the best ways I find to do this, we'll talk about Google reverse image searching and things like that, but a service that does it for you is the best and simplest solution. So I use something called Pixie, Pixsy. And all I do is I upload images that I've uploaded elsewhere online, or I point them to it saying, this is Instagram, this is, these are my photos. And then they trawl the internet, and I'll get a report once a week of all the images that they've found that are mine, that are in different places to where I've said they should be.
Right, okay.
And it's quite interesting because when I write a blog post for somebody and I put one of my own images in it, it finds it. So I know it's working. So then when they come in from all other places, like there's an ongoing one that I'm trying to deal with at the moment, which is a wallpaper, electronic wallpaper company. And it's an image of the plane on the beach in Iceland, the plane wreck, the DC-3 at Sólheimasand.
Okay.
And it just keeps popping up on Chinese domains.
Right.
For wallpapers, for desktop wallpapers. So I'm trying to deal with it, but it's Pixie that's pointed it out to me and helped me find where these things are being used and misappropriated, basically. But reverse image searching with Google, that is another method. It's a tedious method, and I'm not very well versed on it. Are either of you?
Yeah,
No.
I've used it quite a few times.
Okay.
It does take a bit of time and everything to go through, but to be honest, it's only for certain images that I'll search for things, just to kind of keep an eye and see. But I will definitely actually check out your one, Dave, because it sounds quite useful. But funny you should say about Instagram, because so I've obviously shoot portraits, like beauty, fashion, that kind of thing, and I've actually found my photographs on another photographer's page, posing as their own, and it's quite it's kind of a bit hilarious and a compliment at the same time.
It is a compliment, yeah.
And you just think, well, that's great, but you're now selling yourself as a photographer who can take those kind of pictures, and
Right.
you obviously can't because you've stolen them from all other different photographers, and it's a difficult one. I mean, I've obviously approached certain accounts and said, excuse me, but you're using my photo, and some have taken down and some are still there. I don't really know say all the legality of stuff behind it, really, especially from stuff like that in terms of Instagram. So like you're saying, the public domain, once you put something out there, it can be a little bit tricky. So yeah, definitely.
Well, something though, that what you're talking about, Sean, is a clear and obvious violation of a copyright, right? That's there's nothing you can argue against that.
Yeah.
There is something called fair use, and that is where and Dave, you sell to Getty Images, right?
Yeah.
So you've got they'll ask, do you have a model release, or is this for editorial purposes?
Yeah.
So fair use is where you're using the photograph not for a particular gain or association with the, so for example, in the case Dave was talking about, clearly they were using his photograph to make money, right? They wanted to sell these vacation packages to Iceland. But for example, I remember there were some famous photographs that were controversial. One that comes to mind was the first portrait that Annie Leibovitz did on the cover of Vanity Fair of Caitlyn Jenner,
Right.
post-transition. And to use that I believe I used that picture in a blog post, but what I did was I was talking about the photo. That's fair use, right? I was saying it was interesting how she posed Caitlyn this way and the type of lighting she used. That is not an appropriation or a violation of a copyright. That's fair use. It's when you're using the picture either for a commercial gain or an association. So for example, if I was, I don't know, I took there's a picture of, I'm going to pick on you, Dave. Dave, you're eating a hot dog in public, right? You have no privacy expectations. And I sell that picture to the people for the ethical treatment of animals, and they use your picture to say, oh, look at this person doing this. or if they use I post the picture on my Instagram and they take it from there and use it for their own advertising, even though they're a nonprofit, that's still a copyright violation. That isn't fair use.
Yeah, I think the lines are definitely blurred. You know, when you have someone in there who's recognisable. I think, you know, some photos with, like, say, some street photography or you know, that kind of thing, where you can't make out people's faces and things, that's obviously fine to a degree. But when you start being able to recognise faces, that's when obviously model release forms and things come in as well. So there's also that, like you're saying, Stephanie, to kind of consider. So
right, and we, you know, you mentioned earlier a contract gets around a lot. So in cases like that, a model release gets around a lot. And I don't think, and this is where, again, going from copyright, which is ownership, to now a model release, that's permission. That's the model giving you permission to use the photo as the two of you have agreed to. You know, for example, I'll have clients that I might do something like, oh, here's a perfect example, a family session that involves a minor child. You know, and part of the contract we had was that minor child will not be seen anywhere on social media, even though I own the copyright, which is, again, fine with me. That's something we contracted for. And I think people should also realize, some photographers, that it's more than a model release. It's also a property release. If I'm walking my dog in public and you take a picture of my dog, and now you're going to take that picture and, you know, try to sell it to, I don't know, Purina Dog Chow, because my dog's gorgeous. Both of them are. You don't have my model. That's my property. You don't have my model. You don't have a release for that. So that's something else to consider, like buildings or cows or something like that.
Well, there's other implications with that. One of the most famous examples being the Eiffel Tower. So if you take a photo of the Eiffel Tower, you can sell it, no problem. But if you take a photo of the Eiffel Tower with the light show, that light show is subject to copyright. And so you can't sell it, not without permission from the people who own the light show, and you're not going to get it, trust me.
Right.
But let's just cycle back just a step.
Have you tried, Dave?
If we cycle back just a second, look at Instagram. There's quite a few cases that have popped up of famous people posting pictures of themselves and then being sued by the photographer because the photographer owns the image. Right. So the celebrity thinks they're doing nothing wrong because it is a photo of them. I think, I can't think of any examples off the top of my head. I think Ariana Grande's done it. I think she's been involved in this.
Did they credit the photographer, though? This is the most important question.
Well, credit or not. Credit or not, that's not paying the bills. But
they're
do you
using
think there's anything legally and morally, what's going on here?
I would say yes, because they're clearly posting the pictures to promote themselves. They're celebrities.
Yeah.
Right? Versus something like, going back to that whole editorial use that I mentioned, if you're a paparazzo and you take a picture of Ariana Grande walking into a restaurant and sell it to TMZ, People Magazine, or something like that, that's more of an editorial use. So I would say, yeah, they shouldn't be using a photographer's images without permission, even if they credit him or her, to promote themselves. But at the same time, people would say, well, what about if you take a picture of the celebrity and now you're using it?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, well, you know,
and
but it's editorial
where model
use.
Releases don't apply as well.
Right.
If it is paparazzi style, then you don't need a model release. It's news, isn't it? It's not, but it's considered news.
Gossip.
Yeah.
And again, that whole notion, if you're in public, you have no expectation of privacy.
Yeah.
You know, if you're walking down the street and somebody takes your picture, that actually happened to me in Los Angeles. I was taking a picture of the Civic Center, and this guy walks into the picture. Right? And he sees me take the picture, and he comes over to me, and he's like, you know, legally right now, I could take that camera from you and smash it on the ground. And I was like, yeah, try it. Thankfully, I had my brother with me, who's rather large, and Greg stepped out and said, yeah, I don't think so. And the guy backed down.
I mean, yeah, that'd be pretty scary, to be fair. So, I haven't had any things like that, but if someone tried to take my photo, I think I'd be, I don't know how I'd react, actually. I don't know. It's definitely an invasion of privacy, I think, especially when you don't want to be the other side of the camera. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain people who they should expect it. That's, celebrities being the big example, footballers, and, there are people that should expect that sort of stuff. So,
yeah, maybe.
Well, it's interesting. I was going to say, it's interesting. There was a photographer in New York City who took a series of photographs. Are you ready for this? He lives in a high-rise. There's a high-rise across from him. And he took pictures of people in their apartments as art in the high-rise across from him.
No.
But they didn't. No, and they took him to court and he won.
What?
Because it's like if you have an expectation, if you're going to live in a situation where people can see inside and you're not putting up curtains, they found there that there was no expectation of privacy. So
kind of like voyeurism, isn't
it? It's pushing it, really pushing it. I mean, if you're outside in public, yeah, but if you're not in public, then no, I don't. No,
but lines definitely.
Don't like that one.
No.
I'm not saying I agree with that. I think that is not only morally wrong, but it's creepy.
Very creepy, yeah.
So,
I'm
so the moral of the story
to
is
see the pictures.
Get curtains. Get curtains. But Dave, we mentioned editorial use. Since you shoot for a lot of stock, can you give a little information on what is considered when you need a model release versus editorial?
If there is, it comes down essentially to, like I said, news. If something can be considered news, then it passes as editorial, and you don't need certain releases, model releases, property releases. Also, that means the amount of money you're going to make is going to drop because they're sort of hard and fast buyers. So if you're going to sell anything that's considered art, that's creative content, then you're going to need every release. If you can see a person, recognize a likeness of a person or of a building, then you need a release. There are lots of public places in the UK that you need a release for because although they're in the public, they are owned and copyrighted in a sense. One of the most famous examples is Trafalgar Square. So in the heart of London, Trafalgar Square, every tourist goes to see it. Loads of transport routes go through it. It's actually copyrighted. So if you take a photo and sell the photo of it, you technically need a property release. And so therefore, if you don't have a property release, you could sell the image as editorial, but it's not subject to the same conditions. Therefore, you're not going to get as much money. It won't be used creatively, anything like that. But then there are different rules when it comes to putting things in books versus magazines. So if you put something in a magazine or if you put something inside, a picture inside a book, you won't necessarily pay the same or use the same releases or the same methods for obtaining those photos because they're different uses. The cover of a book being another example. So if you have a picture inside a book versus if you have a picture on the cover image obviously has so much more weight and is subject to different rules versus a picture that goes in a magazine or on a website or anything like this. There are so many factors, it's ridiculous. The biggest thing to take away, I think, if you're getting into stock photography and looking at licenses is try and cover all your licenses, your royalties, your releases and things like that. But then try not to worry about it too much, about what it all means, because once it's uploaded, if it's good enough, it's going to sell.
Yeah.
How it sells, it really isn't important as long as it does sell, because then you're busy working on the next project.
Right,
so you can get really bogged down in this stuff, and the legalities of it, I'm sorry, Stephanie, are quite boring.
No. Yes, they are. No.
So
trust me, law can be boring.
Sorry, I just wanted to double back on that. So Dave, so for instance, when we went to America, we went to Monument Valley.
Yeah.
Images like that. So I've seen obviously some that you can purchase and buy. Would that be an example of where you'd have to get, if you wanted to sell it to make money, you'd have to get permission?
Nobody owns Monument Valley.
I don't know about Monument Valley specifically.
Right. Because I know some of the national parks, wasn't it, that you couldn't sell certain images.
Yeah. So the national parks had a thing where if you wanted to take photos to sell, you need to pay them a fee. I think the fee was something like $100 or something.
Right. Okay. Per image or altogether?
For a shoot.
Altogether, I have they're called a commercial use authorization, and I have one for the Smoky Mountains.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I'm allowed.
If you wanted to sell, if you're taking a couple there for a proposal,
correct.
That's obviously covered. But if you were to go and just take a photo of the Smoky Mountains and then sell it, is that also covered?
I believe so, because it falls under commercial use.
Right. Okay.
Right. Okay.
And that's why it's a commercial use authorization.
Does that last all? Is it like a yearly thing, or say, as Dave said, is it per shoot, or how do those things work?
I pay a fee every 2 years, and then also each year they ask me to report on how much money I've made out of my commercial shooting in the Smokies, and I'll pay a percentage of that.
Right,
and
okay.
a lot of photographers complain about that, because you get the people saying, well, it's my tax dollars that support the thing. Come on. You're on federal property making a profit, okay? There are people who run the campgrounds in the Smokies. There's people who run the horseback riding in the Smokies, and they have to. We're all considered concessions, and they have to pay. So, I think it's fair, for the fact that I'm being given this beautiful spot to make money from. Yeah, okay. I have no complaint about that. But Dave, I'm thinking of pictures you've taken. And that you got that picturesque little. Is it in Norway? The colorful little houses right by the fjord. And okay. So if somebody were to say, "Oh, I'm putting together a geography book for second graders," so you wouldn't need for something like that. Is that considered editorial? You wouldn't need a release for something like that.
You wouldn't need a release if you were taking a photo of one of those buildings. Then you might fall into needing a property release. Might. But it depends on the context of the photo. So that iconic scene, there must be 60 buildings or something in that scene. So you're not taking a photo of any particular one of them. You're taking a photo of the larger scene. And so it would be ridiculous to get 60 individual property releases for each of the properties in the image. And so that's where common sense comes into it.
Right.
But if you're clearly taking a photo of one building and you want to sell the image of that one building, then it's very different. But then that takes me to another example, and we're running out of time, but I want to touch on this actually. The Flatiron Building in New York.
Oh yeah.
That's a famous example of a building that you need a release for if it's like on the edge of the photo or features anywhere in the photo.
Right.
It's a strange one, a very strange one. You basically can't sell an image of the Flatiron Building because of the copyright of the design of the building. It's a very strange thing. I don't know if there's anything you can tell us about that very quickly, Stephanie.
No, I know the building very well, having grown up in New York City. I wasn't aware that they were that strict. But I'll tell you what, I have seen more pictures of the Flatiron Building that you really have to stop and consider. It's sort of, if I can go back to my law days, I'd often tell clients, look, I can get you an order from the court, but enforcing it is a different matter. And I wonder at what point whether you could ever claim, look, if you're not going to protect your copyright, you're going to lose it. In law, we have a term called latches. Right, and basically it's that notion of if you have something worth protecting, you better do so, because eventually you could lose it, like adverse possession in real estate or something like that. I don't think that would fall in the same with federal copyright law, but I could be mistaken. As I said, I didn't do intellectual property law. But if you think you're having a hard time finding copies, I mean, just the other day I saw a picture of the Eiffel Tower at night. Right, and as you said, that light show is copyrighted, and you're not supposed to. And yet, it was out there. You could buy it. You could buy a nice poster of it, and whatnot.
Well, that's a good note to wrap up on. Actually, is although I don't know, I'm going to say it again. Although it's boring, you need to have an element of proactivity. You need to do something about it. if you put your photos out there, they're available to steal, then you need to do something about it if they are stolen, because otherwise the work that you've put into those photos is gone for somebody else to gain from.
Yeah.
So something like Pixie to trawl the internet and find the images for you, or to do it yourself with a Google reverse image search, will help you to recover some costs, basically, to bring you in. They'll help you generate invoices that weren't already there from the people that have stolen the image, and you're essentially sending them an invoice to say, it's after the fact, but here's the bill.
Yeah, as well as recognize the fact that sometimes there's nothing a lot you can do. Dave, have you taken on the entire Communist Party in China to gain back any money from them for the images they stole? What's the likelihood? It's slim to none, and Slim's leaving town on a bus. You know, so
well then, but you do need to be a bit proactive, otherwise. Otherwise, they're gone and you don't do anything about it.
But not use a watermark, though.
No, boring, horrible, ugly things.
Tell me if I'm wrong, but have you noticed that sometimes the size of the watermark is proportional to the mediocrity of the photographer's picture?
That is a good observation. That is a very interesting observation. Yeah. And on that, I think... go on. Yeah. So on that, I think it's a good time to wrap up. Some interesting takeaways and interesting... advice from the UK and the USA on copyrights, releases, and all the other boring stuff that comes with being a photographer. I'm Dave Williams, and these two are... Who's going to go first?
Stephanie Richer. I am Stephanie Richer, Esquire, from Knoxville, Tennessee.
Oh, I spoke all over you, Stephanie. I'm so sorry. That was terrible.
Well, that went really well. But anyway, you can find out more about us epicphotographypodcast.com. Look for Epic Photography Podcast on all social media, or Epic Photo Pod if you happen to be on Twitter. And we'll see you again next week where something else awesome is lined up. Thank you very much for joining us. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.